What's going on, everybody? It's Patrick from Purple Park Studios, and today we're going to be modeling this globe that you see. I'll be leaving a link in the description with the texture I use for the actual globe part itself with the earth texture on it, so I'll be leaving a link to that in the description. And if you'd like, you can find a reference of a globe on the internet or something to use when you're modeling. I actually have a globe right here on my desk, so I'm going to be looking at that to refer, so let's just jump right in. So I'm going to try and go a little bit slower in case some people watching might be just starting to learn Blender or use Blender, so I'm going to go a little bit slower. So I'm going to hit A to select everything, X, and then delete. And then I'm going to hit 1 to go into front mode. And I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to go to Mesh. And I'm going to add in a cylinder. And I'm going to hit G, Z, and 1 to just move it up on the Z axis there. I'm going to scroll in with the middle mouse wheel. I'm going to right click and hit Shade Smooth. And then I'm just going to go down here to this little upside down triangle, go to Normals, and check Auto Smooth. And that'll just ensure that the normals are facing the correct way. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control A, and I'm going to apply all transforms. And that is just so that this origin point is now down here at the cursor. So when I scale, it'll scale from that point there. So I'm going to hit S for scale and Z to scale on the Z axis. I'm just going to bring this down like that. Maybe a little bit more, S and Z. And this is going to be the base of our globe here. So I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode, and I'm going to hit 3 for face select mode, and I'm going to left click on the mouse and select this top face here. And I'm going to hit E and S to just extrude and scale in. And then I'm going to hit E and Z to extrude, E for extrude and Z to extrude on the Z axis and extrude up like that. And then I'm going to hit S for scale, and then E and Z again. Then I'm going to hit E and S and scale in a little bit more, and then E and Z to scale up like this. Actually, this one we're going to do just a couple small ones here, so E and S, E and Z, E and S, E and Z. So I'll hit Tab to go out of edit mode, and next I'm going to just left click to select this mesh here, and I'm going to go over here to this little wrench, which is the modifiers tab. So I'm going to left click here, and I'm going to hit subdivision surface. And this is going to obviously make the mesh look a bit weird, but we can do a couple things to fix this. So I'm going to select the mesh by left clicking and hit Tab to go into edit mode, and I don't like to work in this view, so over here under the modifier properties, I'm going to check this upside down triangle, and that will just, you can see the difference there, it just makes it a little bit easier on your eyes when you're working. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bump this levels view up to 2, and I'm going to leave the render view at 2 for now. I'm going to come over here to the mesh, and I'm going to hit Control R to add a loop cut, and I'm going to just left click like that to put the loop cut there. And then I'm going to hit Control R and add one more loop cut here at the top. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom, Control R, like that. And that will just smooth out this edge so it's not so rounded, but then it's also not so square and harsh. Okay, so now that we have a rough base here for the globe, we're going to model the next part that holds it. But before we do that, I'll hit 1 to go into front mode. I'm going to hit Control A, Mesh, and we're just going to add in a UV sphere. I'll hit G and Z to move it up. G and Z, just move it up a little bit. Maybe just scale it down just a tad bit there. Something like that. And we'll right click this and Shade Smooth. We can also add a subdivision surface modifier and just change the renders view to 1. And I think that size looks pretty good. What we can do is just left click and select our sphere, hit G and Z, and just move it down like this, and maybe we'll just scale it up a little bit. And this you can use your reference or just use your eye to whatever you think looks good. So normally globes are tilted a bit, but we're actually going to model everything straight up, and then we'll tilt it at the end. So next I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to go to Mesh, and I'm going to add in a circle. And I'm going to hit this little arrow down here in the corner, and I'm just going to change this from 32 vertices to 64. And that'll just make the circle be a bit smoother. So I'm going to hit G and Z to move it up around the globe like that. And we need to rotate this. So I'm going to hit R, Y, and 90 to rotate it the correct way. Well, actually, it needs to be rotated one more. So I'll hit R, Z, and 90. And now we have it facing the correct way. So I'll hit Tab to go into edit mode, and then if I hit 1, that will allow me to see all the vertices here, and we only need half of this. So I'm just going to select this half of the vertices here and hit X and delete the vertices. So while we're in edit mode here, I'll hit A to select all of these points. If you hit A, it will select all of the points here. I'm going to hit E and Y and extrude out on the Y axis like that, just a bit. And then I'll hit A to select everything. I'm going to tap 3 for face select mode. And we're going to hit Alt E. Well, here, I'll move over here so we can see a little better. I'm going to hit Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and then we can give this some thickness here. So I'm just going to pull it out like that. And then I'm going to right click and shade smooth, and we'll just go to this little triangle here and just hit auto smooth to fix the normals. And so for now, I'm just going to hide this sphere here so we can see a little better what we're doing. So I'm going to select this here, the circle, and I'm going to go to my modifiers tab. But before I do that, I want to see how this origin point is right out here in the middle. Because originally, if you remember, we had the whole circle, so the origin was in the center. I'm going to right click and hit set origin to geometry, and that will just center this origin to the geometry. There's also some other options. You can do origin to center of mass volume, which is, in this situation, it's pretty much the same. So this will work for now, but I just wanted to have that origin point moved over there. So I'll go to my modifiers tab, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. You can see that just smooths things out a bit. And you can make this as fancy or as not fancy as you want. For this tutorial, I'm just going to leave this how it is. I'm going to turn my sphere back on here. So we're going to need to make some points where the globe can connect to this what's going to be a excuse me, what's going to be a steel bar here, and then this will need to connect to the platform of the globe. So if we select the circle here and hit tab for edit mode, under the subdivision surface modifier, we'll just check this upside down triangle so we get this a little bit clearer here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll hit 1 for front mode, we'll hit Shift A, and we're going to add in a cylinder. So we'll do the same process, right click and shade smooth, and go ahead and auto smooth that there to fix the normals. I'm going to hit G and Z, and I'm going to move it up here, and then I'm just going to scale it way down like this. G and Z to bring it up, and we can hit S and Z to just really flatten that out there like that. So hit G and Z, bring this down, and we can tap into edit mode here on our circle, and we'll just hit Control R and add in a loop cut there at the top, and we should do the same for the bottom as well, just so it's a little more squared off and doesn't have this jagged edge there. I'm just going to hit S and X to scale that on the X a little bit like that, just so we have a little more room to work with up here. So now we can tap into edit mode here on our cylinder, and I'm just going to hit S and Z one more time to flatten this out a bit more. And then we can hit 3 for face select mode and grab this top face here, hit I for inset, and just scale this way down like that. Then I'll hit E and Z, bring this up like this, and then I for inset, we'll inset that top face like that, S to scale it, E and Z to extrude up, and then I for inset one more time, E, Z to extrude up, E and Z one more time, S to scale, and then E and Z, and just bring this up into the mesh like that. And we can scale this out a bit at the top also. We will just need to go into our top mode by hitting 7 and hit G and Y to just center that up like that. And then we can tap into edit mode here and just hiding our sphere for a moment so we can see. Face select this here, hit I for inset, and then E and Z, and just pull that down like that. And then if we turn the sphere back on, now it's intersecting with the mesh there, and we have a little connector. And we can use this connector here. We can just hit Shift D, and then G and Z, and bring it down so we don't have to remake it. And then hit R, Y, and 180 to flip it. And then G and Z to bring it up like that. So before we move on to texturing, we need to connect these pieces here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift A, Mesh, and add in a cylinder, and right click Shade Smooth and Auto Smooth to fix the normals. And then we're just going to scale this way down like this. Hit G and Z, bring that up. Just scale it in a bit more like this. G and Z to bring that up. And tap into edit mode here. And I'm going to hit 2 for edge select mode. And holding down Alt, I'll select this whole loop here. You could also just hit 3 and face select this face here. And then I'll hit S to scale, E and Z. And I'll just scale this out one more time like that. And we can just hit 3 for face select here and hit I to inset that top there, so that's a bit smoother. And then we can just select this top face right here. And we will have to center this up, but we'll just hit 1 for front mode right now, E and Z to pull that up. And before we finish this, let's select our circle, this connector, holding down Shift and left clicking the globe, and this connector here. 3 for side view, G and Y to just move this over a bit on the Y like that. That way everything's centered. Check from front view, and we'll tap back into edit mode here on this. And I'm going to hit S and Y to scale on the Y like that. And we might want to hit S and X also here, like that. Alright, so now that we have the globe and all of the parts, we can go ahead and start texturing. And feel free to spend more time adding detail. Like, this is a very simple and very basic model of a globe, but you could definitely spend a lot more time making this fancy, adding some more detailed edges, etc. But for this tutorial, we're just going to keep on moving and get onto the texturing. And the very first thing we're going to texture is going to be the globe itself here. So left click that, and then we'll go to our shading editor. Alright, so I'm here in the shading editor, and the first thing that I like to do is left click this little arrow here and just turn the world opacity down. I just like to work that way. We'll go ahead and select this globe here, and we'll just hit new for new material. And I'm going to left click and just rename this material globe ball. And what I'm going to do is hit Shift A and search for an image texture. And I'm just going to plug the color into the color. And you'll see that it turns black. So what we need to do is hit open, and then we can navigate in our computer to where we save that image texture of the Earth. So mine happens to be on the desktop, so I'm going to select this and I'm going to hit open image. And you can see that loaded in pretty nice. We don't really have to do much in the way of UV unwrapping. If it didn't load in right for you, you could select this globe here and hit tab, and then with everything selected by hitting A, you could hit U and sphere projection. It might do some weird stuff. You'd have to go into the UV editing tab and mess around with this, but we're not going to get into UV editing in this tutorial. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that, and I'm just going to leave it the way it loaded in because I think it loaded in really nicely. So if you are using the texture that I provided in this tutorial and you are using a sphere with a subdivision surface of 1 only, then it should load in no problem. It should load in just like perfectly like this for you. If it's not, just leave something in the comments or message me on Instagram or email, and I'll be happy to help you get this textured properly. So you can see that the roughness is at 0.5, so you could turn that all the way up if you don't want it to be shiny at all, or if you want your globe to be shiny, you could mess with the roughness here, and that will just determine how shiny or not. I'm going to leave it at 0.5 for now, but I think I'm going to turn this clear coat all the way up, and the clear coat roughness I'm going to put to 0.1, or maybe actually we'll go 0.4. And there's also metallic if you want your globe to have a metallic look to it. I don't really want that, so I'm going to Control Z, but be sure to go over here to the render properties and just check ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. Now if you want to add a little bit of extra detail to your globe here, you could hit Shift A, bump, and add in a bump node, and plug this right down in here in the bottom where it says normal. Plug the normal into the normal. And then I don't have an actual displacement map for this, but we can just hit Shift D and duplicate this and plug the color into the height. And then if you just turn back the strength a bit, you can see there's without anything, and then with that up just a little bit like that, you can see you get a little bit more detail and a little more texture on the globe. So I'm going to leave it like that. You can also play with this distance here if you want it to really look funky, but I'm just going to leave it. Or maybe I'll turn the distance up a tad bit. So the next thing we can do here is we can select this base, and we'll just add a new material and call this base. And I know that I am going to make mine brown, so I'm just going to bring this down a bit until I get a nice brown hue. Something like that's looking pretty cool. Now the one thing I do want to do is I want to go and hit Shift A, and I'm going to add in a bump node, and I'm going to plug the normal into the normal, and we're going to add a little something to this to just make it look not so perfect. So I'm actually going to turn clear coat up for this as well. I'm just going to bring the clear coat roughness up a bit to something like maybe 0.2. And then with the bump node over here, we can hit Shift A, and I'm going to add in a noise texture. Try this one first, plug the color into the height, and you can see that makes it look crazy. So first thing we'll do is we'll just turn up the scale a good bit, just to like 26.3, something like that. I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add in a color ramp. And I'm just going to drop that in between the noise texture and the bump node. This will just allow us to filter in how much of that noise texture we want. Play with the scale, turn it up a bit more, and the roughness, bring that down a bit. So I have the roughness at 0.403, and I have my color ramp like so, like here. And then I have the scale on the noise texture up at 148, and I've left the detail at 2, and you can play with this roughness, but I'm just going to leave it in the middle at 0.5. We can add a little bit of distortion there. That just adds a little something extra to the wood down there. And you could really go crazy and continue to mess with this even more, but for this tutorial I'm just going to leave it here. One more thing you could do if you really wanted to, you could add in a mix shader or even just another image texture and plug in an image of wood, and you could UV map that to look correct if you wanted to go for a really realistic wooden look on this base. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the silver part here. And for this tutorial we can make this all the same color, so we'll just make a new material and we'll just call this support. And the first thing we'll do is we'll just turn up the metallic on it, and we'll bring the roughness down to something like 0.24. And we can go ahead and apply this material here to these other objects, and we're going to fix this material a bit. So you could leave it this color if you want. It's a nice color. I think I'm just going to make the base color a bit more of a gold tint to it, something like that. And then with this support material selected, we can go ahead down here and just hit Shift A, and we'll add in a bump node, and we'll plug the normal into the normal, And then we're going to do the same thing, Shift A, we're going to add in a noise texture and plug the color into the height. And then Shift A, well, you know what, we might not even need the color ramp. Let's just see what we can do here with this first. So we'll turn the scale way up, turn the strength way back, and the detail we can just leave that down because it's going to be so far in the background. Just turn the strengths real simple like that. So the strength is at 0.05, the scale is at 20.1, the detail is at 2, and everything else is the same. So, and that will just add a little bit extra to the globe, even though we're not really going to be seeing it that much. So the last thing we need to do is we need to rotate this globe a bit. So I'm going to select this up here and holding down Shift, select the globe here also. And I'm just going to hit R and rotate this. Now the problem is it's not rotating from the center here, so we'll just start with the globe and hit R and rotate that slightly like this. So we'll grab this top piece up here and just hit G and just move it over up towards where Antarctica is and then rotate it into place like that. So there you go. Now you have a little globe. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and like I said, you could really spend a lot of time making this all more detailed. This is just a quick, brief how to make a globe, especially for someone who's just starting out, just to get familiar with some of the hotkeys and just to make something pretty simple. So I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Thanks.